Hi guys, it's me ChazzaHD and welcome to this full live review of qualifying for the 2019 Spanish Grand Prix, which took place about 3 to 4 hours ago at the Circuit de Catalunya in Catalonia near Barcelona, of course. And it wasn't the most exciting session we've ever seen, but it was good. It had some good moments and some surprises along the way as well. And we're going to analyse everything that did happen in qualifying in Spain. Look at who got pole, who finished in the second and third rows, who got into the top 10 from the midfield, and of course who got eliminated in Q2 and Q3 as well. Hopefully you guys are doing well after qualifying. Hopefully you've recovered after qualifying, and no matter where you are in the world, hopefully you're having a good Saturday. But now let's move on to the results of qualifying. Now, if you don't know the results of qualifying, I will now show them to you. So, getting pole position for the third consecutive Grand Prix is Valtteri Bottas. Second place is Lewis Hamilton. Third is Sebastian Vettel. Fourth is Max Verstappen. Fifth is Charles Leclerc. Sixth is Pierre Gasly. P7 is Romain Grosjean. Magnussen is 8th in the other half, and Kvyat is 9th with Daniel Ricciardo in P10. Then knocked out in Q2 was Lando Norris, Alexander Albon, Carlos Sainz, Kimi Raikkonen and Sergio Perez. And then knocked out in Q1, shockingly, Nico Hülkenberg, then Lance Stroll, Antonio Giovinazzi, and the two Williamses of George Russell and Robert Kubica. So those are your results from qualifying. Now let's go team by team and talk about how they did in qualifying. And we'll start at the very top, of course, with Mercedes, who again got a 1-2 in qualifying here in Catalonia. You have to say, their car was so much faster than any other car out there. They had the best car by a mile. Nothing can compete with their car. It is that good at the moment. But I have to say, Valtteri Bottas put in a stunning lap to get pole position. His first run in Q3 was the one that got it. Now, Lewis Hamilton, as I'll get onto in a moment, did make errors on his first qualifying run, but I don't think he would have done a better time anyway, because he was 6 to 6.5 tenths down on Bottas, and I don't think Hamilton's errors cost him that amount of time. So I think Valtteri genuinely did an amazing lap of 15.4. That is a mega lap to set around this track, and he fully deserves pole position. He has been very quick this weekend, and I think for tomorrow's Grand Prix, he's definitely in for a good race. Even if he does fall behind Hamilton at the start, I think he will be pretty close as the weekend, as the race goes on. And won't be too far behind, because Bottas again has been very fast this weekend in Catalonia. So I think Valtteri deserves this pole position, and I think Valtteri is looking very good for tomorrow's race. But now, let's get on to, before we go on to Lewis Hamilton, let's get into what Valtteri had to say after qualifying finished. This is what he said. He said, "I really enjoyed that. This season has started well, and I feel better and better in the car." And if that is true, which I think it is from him, then in terms of his Drivers' World Championship bid, then that's just going to keep getting stronger and stronger. So looking good for Bottas going forward. And these are the key stats after he took pole position. Of course, got pole. That is, by the way, though, his first ever pole position at the Circuit de Catalunya. So great for him, but also great for the team, as they got today their 7th consecutive pole position at the Circuit de Catalunya. They absolutely own this track. Nobody can compete with them when it comes to qualifying at this track, or even at times the Grand Prix as well. So very good there for Valtteri Bottas and the team, of course. But now let's get on to Lewis Hamilton, who I have to say, he was good today. I don't think he was bad, but he wasn't as good as we expect him to be. And I think definitely could have been better in qualifying today because, again, just like in Shanghai, even though, of course, he did win that Grand Prix on race day, but again, in Baku and here in Barcelona, when it mattered most, Lewis got ragged, made mistakes, and just didn't produce the lap that he needed to when it mattered. And considering how he was in 2018, it's a bit weird to see that because we've been so used to Lewis Hamilton when it mattered most in qualifying or in the Grand Prix, producing that moment of greatness that gets pole or wins the Grand Prix. But in the last 3 races in qualifying, he hasn't quite, got it together when it comes to qualifying. I mean, he's only had 1 pole position this season, and that, of course, was in Melbourne. So, yeah, it's a bit weird to see Lewis not being that clinical when it comes to qualifying. But as ever, there is a race tomorrow and points are not scored on Saturday. And I'm sure down to turn 1, Lewis is going to be very aggressive to try and get the lead and probably the win of the Grand Prix tomorrow. And this is what he had to say after losing out in qualifying. He said, Valtteri did a fantastic job. On my side, I didn't put the laps together. Ultimately, I didn't do the job, but it's great for the team to have a 1-2. And if I can reverse it tomorrow, I'll be happy. And I think for him, that is the right attitude to have. Yes, I didn't get pole, but there is still a race, and I can get Valtteri at the start, just like he did in Shanghai. So he can definitely, I think, beat Valtteri Bottas down to the first corner, because it has happened before at this track where second place is beaten first place down to the first corner. So it is possible. But if he doesn't do that and Bottas maintains the lead, it's difficult to see how Lewis Hamilton beats Valtteri Bottas in the Grand Prix. It really is. But I think now we'll move on from them. Mercedes, who, again, I have to say, great performance, and their car is supreme. But now, let's go on to Ferrari, who we didn't expect to be that quick in qualifying. We thought they would be, at best, 3rd and 4th on the grid. But it was even worse than what we were expecting in terms of the gap between their fastest car and pole position and where they are placed on the grid. So, first off, I thought Ferrari would be 1/3 of a second off in qualifying. They ended up 0.8 of a second off pole position. 0.8 of a second. That is monumental to be giving that away to another team. That is monumental, especially for a team like Ferrari. It is simply not good enough. But also, what is not good enough is their starting position. Sebastian Vettel qualified 3rd. I think that's the best Sebastian could do, to be honest, because the car just isn't good enough. But Charles Leclerc will start from P5, not in P4, as Max Verstappen, just like in Australia, is splitting the 2 Ferraris on the grid. Yeah, you could say Leclerc's session was botched due to running over the exit curb in Q2, I believe, with his floor and breaking some of his floor. But he caused himself to finish up in P5 and do the runs in Q3 at the certain times he did. That was his fault. If he didn't run wide, then he wouldn't have damaged his floor and they wouldn't have had to make some small repairs before he went out for the final qualifying session. So people can sit there and say, oh, Ferrari have screwed Leclerc again. Wrong. Leclerc has screwed Leclerc again, just like qualifying in Baku. So I think Leclerc, at the moment, Charles really seems to be inconsistent. We'll get onto him in a moment because I want to talk more about him in just a moment. But let's concentrate on Vettel. Vettel again, he did the best he could. I think the car just isn't good enough. So yeah, third on the grid. I think he did the best he could, and this is what Sebastian had to say after qualifying finished. He said, I think we got everything out of the car, but yeah, I am happy, but not happy. The car doesn't feel bad, but obviously we are not quick enough. Yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up. But now let me get on to Charles Leclerc. Now, I think it's pretty obvious to see so far this season that Charles Leclerc cannot consistently get it together. Now, I know he is young and it's only 5 races into his Ferrari career, but if you get promoted to Ferrari, you don't have any excuses not to perform. You're driving for Ferrari. So let's remove that. But yeah, when it comes to him so far this season, it just hasn't been that consistent. Australia, he was poor up until the final stint of the Grand Prix. Bahrain, he was great. I'm not doubting that. He was great. Shanghai wasn't too bad, but he wasn't as quick as his teammate, Sebastian Vettel. And I agree, the team did screw him over with a strategy, but that's just the way things worked out. Baku, yeah, strategy in the race wasn't great, but if he didn't crash, maybe he could have, solved that issue. And then here, again, damaged his floor, delayed his start to Q3, and I think that did ruin his plan for the session, because I think if he went in doing what was planned, which of course was to do a run at the start of Q3 and then at the end on a new fresh set of tyres, if he did that, then he might have ended up out-qualifying his teammate or beating Max Verstappen. But of course he didn't do that because he caused the floor damage and so on and so forth. But if you really look at his first 5 races at Ferrari, Charles Leclerc hasn't actually been that good and actually has been quite inconsistent. Some sessions he's good and is doing, I think, the best he can do, but then some other sessions he just doesn't get it together. There's no real consistency there with Charles Leclerc right now, and I don't think his performances are really, all in all, if you look at all the 5 races combined, they haven't been that great. Bahrain was great, except for that, nothing's really been that great from Charles Leclerc. So I think it will take time for him to really consistently get a handle on the 2019 Ferrari and, get confident and get more towards Sebastian Vettel, especially in qualifying and consistently beating him and all that. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear to see he has had an inconsistent and not so great start to the season. I don't think anyone honestly can doubt that. But yeah, for Ferrari, poor. And I'm going to tell you now, in Monaco, they might not even be close to a podium in Monaco, given how poor their car is aerodynamically. I think their car might be closer to the midfield than it will be to a podium. But let's move on from them and go on to Red Bull, who I think had a good qualifying session. Max Verstappen, first off, qualified in P4. He maybe, if there was more speed in the car, maybe he could have qualified in third because he wasn't that far behind Sebastian Vettel. But still, qualifying P4 where he did was unexpected and good and was a surprise. So good there for Max Verstappen. I think he definitely can get a podium tomorrow, and I think his chances are at least 50% of getting a podium, because I think the Red Bull car, when it comes again to aerodynamics and chassis and stuff like that, is definitely better than Ferrari. So if they can look after their tyres well, and if they're behind one of the Ferraris with Max Verstappen, if they can stay close enough during the Grand Prix, then I think Max Verstappen can definitely get a podium. So looking good for Red Bull. I still think their chassis and aero is not quite where they want it to be. I think they were wanting to be, at this point in the season, maybe a third of a second faster. but at least they're right on the heels of Ferrari. If not, when it comes to aerodynamics and chassis, better. But I just want to mention, though, Pierre Gasly, because all weekend hasn't looked that great, but when it mattered in qualifying, he did very well. Qualified in P6, that's where he should be at least on the grid, and wasn't too far off Charles Leclerc in P5. So I think Gasly also, like Max Verstappen, is looking good in that Red Bull for tomorrow's Grand Prix, because we know Ferrari on race day tend to get worse and Red Bull on race day tend to improve. So if that happens again, you could honestly see a situation where Red Bull beat Ferrari with one of their cars, if not both of their cars. I think Red Bull definitely have the possibility of doing that in the race tomorrow, because if you take away Ferrari's extra speed in the first sector in terms of Ferrari's great power advantage over Red Bull, take that away, Red Bull have a better car around this track. So looking good for Red Bull. I think they're a dark horse for sure for a podium, or even a third and fourth finishing position in the Grand Prix. I think they are that strong compared to Ferrari, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if they finished on the podium, and I think they would deserve it, to be honest, considering that that they have, I think, improved their car. I think people are kind of forgetting. I mean, yeah, Red Bull's car is not as good as it could be, but I think if you look at it, say, where they were in Shanghai and Baku, I think Red Bull have definitely made progress. Not as much as they would want to compared to, say, Mercedes, but compared to Ferrari, they definitely gained and closed in on Ferrari. But before I go on to the midfield, guys, I'm going to pause and come to you guys in the comments and live chat. What I want you guys to do right now is comment, what did you think of qualifying for these teams? What did you think of the performances by the teams and drivers? For Mercedes, were you surprised by Valtteri Bottas' great pole position? For Ferrari, how much, again, of a disaster was it? And for Red Bull, do you think they can get a podium tomorrow? I think their chances are very, very good of getting a podium. Let me know right now in the live chat and comments, and I'll read out as many comments as I can in the next 5 minutes or so, and then we will go on to the midfield that, again, was very all over the place at times. But I just want to say, don't forget to subscribe for my next live stream, which is at 1 p.m. tomorrow, UK time, 1 hour before the race starts, for the race watch along for the 2019 Spanish Grand Prix. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or go to my homepage, subscribe, and hit the notifications bell. But before I do come to you guys in the chat, I'm just going to take a quick drink, clear my throat, and then I'll get to reading your comments. Right, so let's see what you guys have to say. Right, let me try and find the best comments I can. Bristol Racing says it's 2016 Part 2. I think you have to agree with that. Let me just see what is going on in the comments here. Neil saying Leclerc is bad in qualifying. Yeah, sounds like Vince McMahon, Brett screwed Brett. Yep. That's exactly what I was thinking of when I said that as well. It's true though. You can't keep complaining about Ferrari screwing Leclerc when he's doing it to himself in the last 2 races. You've got to look at it and look at what actually has happened instead of what you think has happened. It's clear to see what's happened. Leclerc, 2 qualifying sessions in a row, has made a mistake that has ended up costing him track time and also position, in my opinion. That's nothing to do with Ferrari. Ferrari have given him what they can give him at the time. He has to go out there and do the best he can, like Sebastian Vettel did I think, in Baku and also at this race and in Shanghai and in Australia as well. That's all the drivers can do. Do the best you can with what's been given to you. Leclerc has not done that in the previous 3 races, in my opinion. Right, let me read out some more comments. Astro Stevo, can Red Bull get a podium? Yes, and it's not because he says only if Mercedes or Ferrari take each other out, I reckon. I don't think that'll need to happen. I think Red Bull on genuine pace can beat Ferrari. I think they have a good enough car because, again, if you take away Ferrari's advantages in the first sector, which is basically them having more power, in the rest of the track, second and third sector, Red Bull have a better car. And power tends to be less important in the race than in qualifying, because in the race you can't really use that extra power a lot. In qualifying you can, because in qualifying you're pushing as hard as you possibly can, but in the race it's rare that you push as hard as you possibly can. You only push hard, say, around the pit stops and on the first lap. That's it. So I think Red Bull can genuinely beat Ferrari. RD says, I heard Ferrari haven't used their new updates to the fullest. Even if they haven't, Merc still have an engine upgrade in development. As I said in my practice watch along, Ferrari bringing an engine upgrade to this Grand Prix is stupid, because the next 2 races, this race and Monaco, does not require you having good straight line speed. The next track that requires that is Canada, and that's normally where teams or engine manufacturers bring their new power units, because it's the first time you can without possibly incurring penalties later on in the season, but also it's a good place to test out your new power unit because it's a power track. But Ferrari are panicking and they rushed it forward, and it's not going to make a difference to their positions. It's not going to make a difference at all. And in fact, you could argue if Ferrari didn't have the new power unit this weekend, Verstappen would have finished up in 3rd today. That's how bad Ferrari are. Ferrari are terrible right now. Absolutely terrible. And I can tell you now, Ferrari have little chance of even being within a second of pole position in Monaco with that car. That car they have right now is god awful compared to what it should be. Sorry, I just had a palpitation there. That was annoying. Let me just read out some more comments from you guys. Eric Myers, aren't Ferrari working on a new suspension for Monaco? At least there are some rumours out there. I haven't heard that, to be honest. The only thing I was hearing about when it came to Ferrari, when it came to upgrades and stuff, was this engine upgrade for this Grand Prix. I haven't heard about any new upgrades or setups for future races. And I think, to be honest, they need to look even further past the next race, because I think, honestly, at this point, I think Ferrari, I think they need to look at 2020 soon. I think they need to, because what are they going to achieve out of this season? What are they going to achieve in 2019? Nothing. This season will go down as a disaster. That's it. This season will be a forgettable one for Ferrari. This season will most likely go down like 2016. I'm not saying they're not going to win a race, but it could be a season where they don't win a race, and it will be remembered in the same way. A season where, coming into the season, you're expecting Ferrari to be good. You're expecting them to really compete with Mercedes more so than they did the years before. And then they end up dropping back and, you know, just failing to really get the best out of their car. So it's, you know, it's it's a disaster this season for Ferrari. And I think, again, they should soon enough start to focus on 2020. I think if by Austria they haven't got any real closer to winning a race, I think by then they should probably start to focus on 2020, because the only two races coming up I can see that car doing well enough to be competitive enough for possibly getting a win if things go their way is Canada and Austria. Austria more so than Canada. But even at those tracks, I'm not sure they're going to win. So, yeah, give it a few races. We'll see where Ferrari are. But, yeah, by Silverstone, don't be surprised if Ferrari are working on the 2020 car by Silverstone or by the summer break. Because, again, what's the point continuing on developing this terrible car if by Silverstone you're no better, if not worse off? So yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Ferrari get on. But now I think I'll move on to the midfield, because I think I've talked long enough about other teams. Let's go on to the midfield then. Renault, not good enough. Daniel Ricciardo's lap, don't be fooled by that lap time. You should look at that lap time as Daniel Ricciardo doing a great job, not Renault having a good car. That Renault car is poor. It's awful. There is not one redeeming fact about it. Well, the only redeeming fact is that they have two drivers driving it who are good, but they just don't have the machinery to do enough with it and to be in the positions that they deserve to be in. That is just the situation at Renault. They are that bad. And yeah, 10th and 16th in qualifying. Coming to this Grand Prix, I think Renault would have been expecting a bit more than that, especially after testing. Coming into this season, if you asked me where Renault would be at this Grand Prix in qualifying, I would have said probably, I don't know, 7th and 9th to be safe as a prediction. That's being safe. I would have expected them at most to be where Haas were in qualifying. But they have really dropped the ball. They have took one massive step back with their car. They really have. They've basically gone back to how they were in 2017. They've gone back, not forwards. And that is a disaster for this team. Ricciardo, by the way, will not start in P10. He will start P13. So not only does he have a grid penalty, which of course will affect his race result, but because he qualified inside the top 10, he has to start on the soft tyres, which are already worn. So he is already compromised. Not only compromised because of his car, but also compromised because he is on the wrong types of tyre. Because if you qualify outside the top 10, of course, you can be on whatever tyres you want for the Grand Prix, or the start of the Grand Prix. And I think most people are going to go for the medium tyre. Ricciardo, starting 13th, has to start the soft tyre. That is not going to fare well for him. So, yeah, not looking good for Renault. I'm struggling to see whether they will score points. That's how bad it has got for that team, but not looking good at all. Next up, McLaren. Disappointing. I have to say disappointing. 11th and 13th. They should have done better than that. Carlos Sainz could have done better if he didn't make a critical mistake at the exit, I believe, of turn 12. So definitely could have done better at the end of Q2 to get into Q3. But yeah, disappointing qualifying. They will start the Grand Prix 10th and 12th. But I was expecting not anything massively better than that, but say slightly better. Say 9th and 11th, something like that. So, yes, not massively disappointing, but it's definitely not as good of a position as they could have ended up in. So slightly disappointing for McLaren. I think they would have wanted to do better, but at least one of their cars gets to start inside the top 10 and choose what tyres he is on. And for Carlos Sainz, I'm sure he can be faster than P12 on the grid without making any errors. So I think McLaren will be definitely good in the race. I don't know how good, but I think they'll be strong. I think they'll definitely get a car in the points. I don't think it'll be both cars, but I think one of their cars will get into the points, and I think McLaren will have a decent Grand Prix. But yeah, qualifying not as good as it probably was going to be, going into qualifying for them. Next up, Alfa Romeo. Now, someone, whilst I was answering questions, actually asked, why are Alfa so slow? I can't remember your name, but I'll answer it now. It's because this track just doesn't suit their car, but also I think their car isn't quite where the team want it to be. They were hoping, Alfa, for them to be in a position like, say, Toro Rosso were today in qualifying, where they qualified, 9th and 12th, and they'll start from 9th and 11th. That's where Alfa were hoping to be by this time in the season. But I think with developments of their car, with the way their car has performed, it just hasn't gone quite the way they wanted to. I think some areas of the car do need work, especially the rear end of the car. Not because it's bad, but because it just doesn't have enough rear downforce to seriously compete with teams like Haas and even Toro Rosso and McLaren this weekend. So, yeah, for Alfa, not looking that great. I'm going to be honest. I think their chances of points are not great. I think they can do it, but I think their chances are definitely hampered by what is a poor qualifying P14 and P18. So, in regards to tomorrow's Grand Prix, don't expect any miracles, because I wouldn't expect Alfa to score any points. If they can nick a point from where they are on the grid, that would be great, because they do desperately need to stay in that fight with, McLaren, Racing Point, Renault, Haas, teams like that. They need to be able to stay in that fight. And if they have a poor result in the race tomorrow, like they've had in qualifying, then they won't be able to do that. So they need to try, if they can, and nick a point, even if it's a lucky nicking of a point. They need to try to get that, but it's going to be tough. It really is going to be tough, especially with Kimi Raikkonen only down in 14th position. Next up is Haas, who did have the best car in the midfield. It's pretty clear to see that. They've had the best car in the midfield ever since practice 1 got underway on Friday morning. So no surprise that Haas are P7 and P8. Very good qualifying. Nothing I can really add to Haas's qualifying, really. They were just very, very good. As good as we thought they would be. Well done to Haas F1. But this is the thing. This is the caveat. Is that we've seen this before with Haas. Great qualifying, terrible race. And I think, given the tyres and how they normally perform at this track, and given Haas's struggles, I don't expect Haas to finish where they've qualified at all. I think Haas will definitely drop back. I think definitely Kvyat, Norris, Sainz, people like that have a very good chance of beating them, especially Norris and Sainz, considering they are better when it comes to the races, McLaren, in terms of race pace, but also, if they do decide to start on the medium tyres, they're already starting on a better compound. So I think Haas are going to struggle tomorrow. I think they can nick a point. It really depends on the competition in the midfield, whether it's strong or not. But I think Haas, they'll definitely be in and around P10, P9, but they won't finish in P7, P8. I don't see that at all, because I think they'll drop back. I think they're definitely going to do an extra pit stop than a couple other teams. And I think they're going to struggle. I really think they will struggle. Hopefully they prove me wrong with their new upgraded package, but I don't think I will be proved wrong. But hopefully I am. But yeah, for the race, I still don't think they're going to be that great, but for qualifying, they've done the best job they can possibly do. Next up, Toro Rosso. Good qualifying for Toro Rosso. Danny Kvyat in P9 and Alexander Albon qualifying in P12. They will start the Grand Prix 9th and 11th because of Daniel Ricciardo's penalty. That's a good showing so far from Toro Rosso, and I think they are dark horses to end up finishing at the front of the midfield in tomorrow's Grand Prix. I think they really are, because their car has looked very good this weekend. They have really gone under the radar as well this weekend, but they always, at this track, tend to have a good car, and once again, they've shown that. But yeah, Toro Rosso, I think, will definitely score points of one car. I'm going to say it now. I think Kvyat, if he is the leading Toro Rosso, I think he will definitely finish in, say, the top 8 on the grid. With Albon, I'm not too sure. It really depends on his start, what tyres he starts on, how his first stint goes, stuff like that. If it goes all well, then he might get in the points as well. But I think definitely with Kvyat, with the way he's been this weekend, I think he definitely is a contender for a strong points finish. And I wouldn't be surprised if he finished where Haas are on the grid. Wouldn't be surprised at all. So looking good for Toro Rosso. And you have to say, I think the Toro Rosso car is slightly better in the pecking order now than it was before the big upgrades for this Grand Prix. So Toro Rosso, they haven't massively improved, but they've definitely improved somewhat. And that is going to be a good thing for them going forward for the rest of 2019, because they can definitely still have a say on who finishes 4th in the Constructors. And remember that they are, P9 in the Constructors, but they're not too far behind. So if they have a strong race tomorrow, they could really shoot themselves up in the Constructors. Next up, Racing Point. I think Racing Point probably had the worst car in the midfield. We're not counting Williams, of course, but yeah, I think Racing Point probably had the worst car in the midfield. Their car just doesn't seem to have any real grip at this track. It's not really dialing into the track. It doesn't seem like it's a car you can consistently drive and not have small little, running wide and stuff like that. So not a good car this weekend is the Racing Point. And Perez, 15th, Stroll, 17th. I know we've harped on Stroll before, but you have to say he hasn't exactly been given a good enough car to get out of Q1 for the first time in 2019. So, yeah, for Racing Point, yeah, it's just really poor this weekend. And I think in tomorrow's race, expect them to drop down the Constructors after the result, because I don't think they will score points unless we get a crazy race and they have some amazing race pace that we did not foresee before. And finally is Williams, who of course are at the back. But I just want to mention George Russell, because he was only like half a second off Nico Hülkenberg in the Renault. And I think he deserves massive amounts of praise for that time. Massive amounts of praise. To be half a second off the Renault in that Williams, and yes, that Williams, is very, very, very impressive. And I think there he really has showed how if you put him in a good enough car, or a car that's solidly in the midfield, he can be a good driver, but he just cannot show enough of that in that car, which is terrible. So great by Russell, and I think he's definitely impressed a few people in the Formula 1 paddock after that qualifying lap time against other drivers. But guys, that is pretty much it for the review of qualifying. But before I go, make sure in the comments to put in, or in the live chat as well, to put in your thoughts about the midfield. About Renault, McLaren, Alfa, Haas, Toro Rosso, Racing Point. Let me know what you thought about their performances today. Who was poor? Who was very good? Who surprised you? in a positive or negative way, let me know right now in the live chat and the comments, and I'll respond to as many as I can. And when it comes to the live chat, and I'll respond to as many comments in the live chat in the next, say, 5 minutes or so. But before I do, let me just quickly have a drink and then we'll move on to your comments. Right, let's see what you guys have to say. Mario Master asks, do you see Russell in a car other than the Williams in 2020? It depends on what happens elsewhere. It really does depend on what happens elsewhere. I think Russell, the only thing he can do is do the best he can in that car and hope that one driver has really bad performances and gets kicked out. But if you look at the grid so far and you look at the performances so far of all the drivers, I don't see how Russell can get out of the Williams, because no one that is in a car that he can get into contractually, basically the Racing Point in the Mercedes car, there's no one that is performing bad enough, I think, to be dropped. Now, you could say Lance Stroll, but it's Lance Stroll. His dad owns the team. Ain't gonna happen. The only way he can get to Racing Point is if Perez gets dropped. Perez doesn't deserve to be dropped. Perez has been one of the best 10 drivers this season, so he's not going to be dropped, is he? So it's a shame. It's a shame. The only seat that he could get in a surprising way is the Haas, because even though, yes, Haas have a relationship with Ferrari, Haas do not listen to Ferrari when it comes to driver decisions in regards to, who should be in that car and not, because Grosjean and Magnussen are both from completely different backgrounds and have nothing to do with Ferrari. Grosjean is a Renault boy and Magnussen was a McLaren boy. So it's not like there's any allegiances there. But yeah. Right, let me find some more comments here. And by the way, yeah, quite embarrassing for Kubica. 1.2 seconds off of Russell. I think Russell did do a great lap, but also I think Kubica was a bit poor. And I think this weekend has been terrible. Crystal Racing says, Toro Rosso would be amazing if they were an independent team with a huge sponsor splashing dosh into them. They would, I think, from the point of view of drivers, because they would be able to select which drivers are in that car, because we know Franz Tost and people like that at the team don't have a choice of who drives for Toro Rosso. It's down to Helmut Marko and also a bit Christian Horner. So, yeah, I think Toro Rosso, I don't think it'd be amazing, but they would be definitely a strong midfield team if they were independent but had a good backer. Right. Let me find some more comments here from you guys. Just trying to find some comments. John Hubner says, why is so many people all up on Ferrari? If you take away the Schumacher era, they are doing what they have always done, just being Ferrari. Well, I don't think that logic makes that much sense, because you could say the same for Mercedes. If you take away the V6 turbo domination, what are Mercedes? Not really anything that special. And also, I disagree with that from a second point of view of Ferrari have had other periods of success other than Michael Schumacher. If you go back and look, between 1974 and 1983, Ferrari actually won plenty of titles. I think they won over 10. combined titles. That's drivers and constructors combined. I think they won the constructors in 74, 75, 76, and then I think they won it 3 more times in 79, 82, and 83, I think. Don't quote me on that, I might be wrong, but I know they won plenty of constructors titles back then. And you know, Niki Lauda won what, 2 titles with Ferrari, and Jody Scheckter won in 79. So I disagree. I don't think if you just take away the Michael Schumacher era, they're just being Ferrari. They really were the best team in Formula One from 1974 to 1983 because they were the most consistent at being at the front of the grid, and they won the most titles in that time. So I disagree with that point. And then John Huebner says, Jesus Christ, dude, yes, if we go back to the 70s and 80s. Well, you said take away the Schumacher era, and then it's just Ferrari being Ferrari. You've got to look at the entire history. You can't just look at the period of time which, you know, suits your point. You've got to look at all eras for Ferrari. You can't just look at a 20-year period. You've got to look at the whole, you know, bigger picture. Ferrari, once upon a time, before the whole title drought between Scheckter and Schumacher, Ferrari, once upon a time, what, 35, 40 years ago, were the best team in Formula One. For about 10 years, they were consistently the best team. They didn't always have the best car in every season, but they were always up there. So, yeah. And Niwesh says they won the constructors in 75, 76, 77, 79, 82, and 83. Exactly. That's how many constructors? That's 6 constructors championships in 8 years. That's good. That's very, very good. So I don't think you can really argue against that. And also, they had 3 drivers championships in that time as well. So let's not act like Ferrari only dominated from 99 to 2004. They didn't. They dominated from about, I'd say 74, because they were very quick that season and really should have won the championship. But they had bad reliability. But yeah, if you look at 74 to 83, Ferrari were the best team and were very successful, even though they really could have been a lot more successful than they were. But it was still very successful compared to other teams in certain eras. Let's now read out a couple more comments and then I'll get to the end of the stream. Crystal Racing says, but the British independent teams always created innovative radical cars compared to Ferrari. True, but those radical cars didn't last very long. I mean, look at the Lotus, was it 79 or 78? I can't remember the exact number. I think the 1978 Lotus that was great. That car was only great for 1 season. After 78, they were nowhere compared to where they should have been. And in the previous 2 years, they were good, but not that good. And the other teams you mentioned, yeah, they were good for a couple years, but they didn't have a 10-year period of consistently winning races, being at the top, always competing for the World Championship like Ferrari were between 74 and 83. So yeah. And Astro Stevo makes a great point as well. Ferrari should have won the Drivers' Championship in 76 because if Lauda didn't have his crash at the Nürburgring, Lauda wins the championship. So that's 4 championships for the drivers that they should have won. And then what? How many constructors they have? 6. So yeah, almost in fact, they almost had 10, and they really should have had 10 titles combined in the space of 8 years. That's very impressive. Simon Troops asks, do you see Red Bull winning a race before Ferrari? Yes. I honestly think Red Bull by Silverstone will probably be ahead of Ferrari. Not at every track, because certain tracks like Austria, Canada, Ferrari will have enough power to stave off Red Bull, but tracks like Monaco, Red Bull will be faster, no doubt about it. Paul Ricard, I think Red Bull could have a good chance of beating them. I think Mercedes will definitely destroy Ferrari at that track. Hungary, Red Bull destroy Ferrari. Hockenheim, I think Red Bull will be great. So yeah, I think Red Bull, they have a bigger chance, in my opinion, of winning a race before Ferrari do, for sure. And yeah, addiction, that is true. When I say Red Bull, I say Verstappen. Absolutely. Pierre Gasly's not winning a race. No way. Let me just find some more comments. And I'm going to find one final comment and to end on, and then I'll come to the end of this stream. Expectations for this race. You know what? I'll answer that as my final comment or question from Mr. Random Guy. Expectations for this race. In terms of entertainment, it will be like Baku. It will be a 5 out of 10, meh, not bad, not great race. That's what it's going to be. It's not going to be anything special. If you're expecting a great race tomorrow, then I think you are setting yourself up for a big disappointment. But if you think it's going to be the worst race of all time, I think you're being a bit too pessimistic. It's going to be a 50-50 kind of race. Nothing special. You won't remember it in 15 years. Hopefully we do, but I don't think it's going to be that special of a race. There will be some passing, some overtakes in pit stops and stuff like that, but again, it's going to be a 5 out of 10 meh kind of race. But there you go. That is the end of my review of qualifying. Thank you guys for coming along and being part of the stream as always. And again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notifications bell for the videos coming up tomorrow, or the streams coming up tomorrow. So tomorrow at 1:10 p.m. UK time, or 10 past 1 p.m. UK time, I will be live 1 hour before the race starts with the race watch along. We'll do the build up, then the race watch along, then the reaction, and then at 6 p.m. UK time, we'll be doing this like the same we've done here, same time, 6 p.m. UK time. We will be doing a review of the race and just what happened on race day in Catalonia. So don't forget to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there, or just go to my homepage, click subscribe and hit the notifications bell. Also, don't forget to hit the like button and comment down below what you thought of this video and what did you think of qualifying for the Spanish Grand Prix. Don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. That is the best place for notifications for my videos. And also, that is the hardcore Chazza HDL community, and we are very close to 200 members in the server. It would be great to have you as the 200th member in that server. So make sure to join that. Link below in the description. It's about third from bottom, I think. Also, follow me on Twitter at Chaz6110 and check out my website, chazzahd.com, for more content like this. But guys, until race day for the 2019 Spanish Grand Prix, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.